Woo. Welcome again to the Peaceful Solution Character Education Program Teacher Certification course. My name is William, and you can be seated wherever you are. Thank you for joining us, whether you're here at the Peaceful Solution headquarters or you're joining us online. You can, if you're tuning in online, you can go ahead on the page you're on Facebook. You can find a drop-down menu at the top where it says download the manuals. We're on the self-control manual, which is the third manual in the junior high series. Self-control. And we're going to be picking up where the last teacher, Chris, left off. And we're covering chapter 4, which is self-control and communication. Applying self-control to interaction and communication. And I'm really pleased to get to this section because I know it's a very important aspect of character development and building relationships is learning how to communicate properly and interact properly using self-control, which is the book that we're learning from. So let's go ahead and open our manuals. Chris left off on page 90, but as usual, we need to go back. It's been a few days. We're going to go back and we're going to rehearse just a little bit of what we learned. And I want to start on that note to the teacher that Chris covered on LP4A. And it talks about the volumes of books that have been written about the art of communication. If you can put up that first slide, I can give you just an idea. There are volumes, many, many different types of books, some of them about active listening, which we learn about in the Peaceful Solution here. Also about body language, the importance of listening. I think there's even a book there called Verbal Judo. Well, we don't promote judo, but those are just some of the names of the volumes and volumes of books out there about the art of communication, because communication is an important aspect of character development. So it says, talk shows discuss how many problems arise because of misunderstandings. Conflicts arise and wars are fought because there's a breakdown in the ability to converse and in turn listen to what is being said. So self-control is successful communication. Self-control is vital to successful communication and healthy interactions. That word vital, it means it's of the utmost importance. It's necessary, okay? So this fourth lesson is we're focusing on the skills needed to communicate effectively with respect and consideration. And then it goes on to say in the second paragraph, and I think this is important, this is why I wanted to read this again, that one of the best ways a teacher can instruct students in the art of proper communication is by their example. And it says, make every effort to actively listen to your students, remembering to read body language, facial expressions, and tone of voice. Right now, we've been doing a lot of classes since the COVID outbreak. We've been doing the majority of our classes, I know myself, over the telephone. So, as you can imagine, it's not quite the same as somebody being in person where you can read their facial expressions, you can see the body language, you have the eye contact. You have none of that, okay? All you have is words, okay? Words in the book and words coming from the teacher, and which makes it even more important to try to gauge from the student, what they're learning by getting them to answer questions so you can see what I've been doing. What I've found is quite effective, and I'm telling you this because you might have to do this yourself as a teacher. What I've been doing is I've been making them write me a summary of the lessons. A lot of my students are they'll tune in to watch these lessons at a later time. They'll watch the lesson, and I tell them you need to write a summary of what you learned in that lesson. And that gives me a really great idea of how much they comprehended in the lesson by what they write on paper. And I'm telling you, I've got some pretty excellent summaries from some students. And I think people can verbalize, or they can sometimes explain things better when they write it down than they can when they try to say it verbally. Sometimes written communication is easier for some people, and I've found with students it is a lot easier for them to write out what they've gained, the knowledge, the insight that they gained on paper, than it is to verbalize it to me. They probably feel a lot more comfortable when they're not, the teacher's not right there, and they're thinking, am I going to say the wrong thing, or whatever, well, they can do it in the privacy of their own home. They can think about it. The teacher's not there, so they have a little more time to word it correctly, and et cetera. It's been working out really great. So, but again, you don't have the advantage, when you're over the phone with somebody, to know how they're receiving the information, because you can't really see their reactions. So anyway, it says, encourage proper communication skills within the classroom at all times. Never condone disrespectful, aggressive, or violent interactions. And above all, maintain your own self-control in every teacher-student interaction. Because remember, we're teaching by example. That's the best way to teach. And none of us are perfect. We do make mistakes at times, but if we're quick to correct it, if we don't let it go, and we show the humility to the student and say, hey, I shouldn't have reacted like that. I apologize. It gives the student a great example of humility and how to practice, forgiveness, humility, and settling things using the peaceful solution. If they see us do that, they'll learn that, hey, we're all still learning. None of us are perfect. Okay, so let's look at, now let's look at the LP4D, and we're going to look at number 4, because that's where we're going to be picking up on tonight. It told us there, tell students that positive communication and interaction builds strong, respectful relationships, and have students turn to page 89 and 91, or through 91 in their handbooks, and read the sections entitled Introduction and What Exactly is Communication. Stress that for communication to be successful, self-control must be used, okay? And that word must, if you're a legal scholar, you'll know that means, there's no wiggle room. You have to do this in order to have proper communication between a listener or a speaker and a hearer. Okay, so let's go ahead and turn over to page 89 and just quickly review what Chris went over on 89. Let me get my bearings here. So at the top of the page, it told us it takes self-control to interact and communicate respectfully. Can you put up that slide? Y'all remember the self-control acronym in the peaceful solution? Stop so you can, think. Stop so you can calm down, so you can let the emotions pass, so you can think clearly about what your options or your choices are in that situation. And remember, your options should never be negative options. You shouldn't be thinking, well, I could slap them, or yeah, I could just go ahead and, no. You shouldn't be considering the negative, Eliminate the negative and accentuate the positive in everything. And then consider your positive options you have in that situation and proceed with the right option for that particular situation. And remember, a right option or a right choice, it never brings harm to somebody, whether it's physical harm, emotional harm. Remember, words, as we're going to learn tonight, words can be more damaging sometimes than fists or anything else. Okay, so remember that STOP acronym at all when we're talking here about, as we're going through this, because it takes self-control to interact and communicate respectfully. And you're interacting all the time, daily, unless you're on the top of Mount Tibet and there's nobody there, Yetis running around or something, you're pretty much interacting with each other on a daily basis. So this is going to come in handy for every interaction, because I think Chris might have mentioned last time, or it could have even been David, that each interaction we have with each other counts. It counts. Whether it's just a hello, how you doing, or a smile as we pass by, or an acknowledgement, or any kind of communication, a business dealing, transaction, or whatever communication we have with each other, it counts. In other words, people remember those interactions. People will remember, well, how we said, the way we looked when we said it, whether it was positive or negative, etc. So we have to be careful to make sure that, we leave a lasting impression of a positive interaction in someone's mind, not something negative. And if we do have a negative interaction, like I said, we need to be quick to fix it. That's remember, none of us, we're all practicing the peaceful solution. Okay? And today, what is it, 103, 104 degrees? There might have been times we felt a little hot and a little sweaty, and, we might not have handled things. We're crazy from the heat, so to speak, and we had one of those momentary lapse of peaceful solution reasoning in our mind, and we said the wrong thing, or we reacted a little harsh or whatever because, we didn't apply proper self-control. We should have set our mind in advance that, hey, today's going to be a hot day. I probably, might get a little heated if I'm not careful. So set your mind in advance, to go to the extra mile to try to deal with people in situations in a way that we don't overreact or something. We could do that to kind of try to avoid those kind of things. But those are the kind of things we got to keep in mind when we're interacting, because remember, interactions count. They are, people remember what we said and what we did. So it tells us that imagine not being, I'm in the first paragraph, it says, imagine not being able to communicate with those you care about. Simple things that you now take for granted would be impossible. Imagine, I think Chris mentioned, your house is on fire and you can't call the fire department because you can't communicate. Can you imagine that? You just have to sit there and watch it burn down. Can't tell anybody anything. He mentioned coma, where somebody's in a coma and, they can hear everything going on. They're aware of their surroundings, but they can't talk. They can't move. They can't let anyone know that, hey, I can hear you. I'm here. I'm alive. I'm aware. They can't do it. Okay, so imagine, how frustrating that could be. And some people are in comas for years. Okay, I remember a man, one of those Israeli leaders, I think it was, what was that guy's name? Ariel Sharon. I think he was in a coma for 11 or 12 years. Okay, if you can imagine that, that's a long time. So some of these comas can last quite some time. Okay, so in the second paragraph, it says, ironically, the way in which we communicate often leads to misunderstandings, hurt feelings, and conflicts. And now, if you can put up the next visual, you'll see that, it's gotten so out of hand, that they have to have these, keyboards with, 1,000 emojis on there to make sure that whoever you're communicating with understands how you're feeling, what you're thinking, or whatever at the time you're sending that message. So it's not misunderstood. They got that smiley face, where you can send because sometimes somebody might think they don't see when you're texting, they don't see your facial expressions, they don't see your body language, they don't hear your tone of voice. And all of these are part of communication. So the emojis sometimes help people to trans or convey to that person that, hey, I'm not upset when I'm saying this. Have you ever got one of those texts where everything was in capital letters? So you thought, man, they must really be mad. They must be angry right now because everything's capitalized. Well, how do you know that their capitalized button, they just ignored it and didn't realize it was on, and they sent everything in capital letters, But sometimes we jump to conclusions because that's what we perceive in the words that are written, because of the way they're written. So now we have, like I said, we got these emojis and things to try to minimize the misunderstandings, the hurt feelings, and the conflicts that come from communication, especially written communication or text communication or Facebook or whatever social media platform it is. It says, if you've ever said something that you later regretted, then you know how important it is to choose your words carefully and to treat others with consideration. Or as I think Chris told us once, the author said, you know, choose your words carefully before you spits them out of your mouth, you know, like you chew your food. Make sure you chew your words carefully before they come out. In other words, don't let your mouth work before your brain works, you know, like put your brain in gear before your tongue's in gear, I guess you might say. It says, we certainly want others to treat us with respect, and we should make it our goal to always communicate and interact in a way that's respectful, considerate, and compassionate. Let's look at those definitions of what we just read there. Just get a reminder. Let's look at the next slide. Remember the word respectful from the character unit on page 14. It said, to value others as important as yourself and to allow that to show through your actions and attitude. And that word compassionate, it means to care about the needs of others. And the word considerate, by the way, compassionate's on page 29 of the character unit, but considerate actually is tied in with compassionate because it means to care about another's feelings. And compassion is actually caring about other people's feelings as well, not just their needs, but their feelings as well. So they both tie in with each other. Now, an important part of developing a positive moral character is learning how to communicate with self-control. When we interact without self-control, feelings get hurt, people are misunderstood, and conflicts arise. So in this chapter, we're going to focus on learning how to apply self-control in our communication with peers, family, and those in authority. And we will also explore practical ways to respond when someone lacks self-control and speaks and behaves in a way that is threatening and aggressive. And that's very important to learn because, you know, you will run into people that they don't know how, you know, they don't know the STOP acronym. They don't know what you're learning in the Peaceful Solution. And at times, you know, you could be faced with somebody that's totally out of control, and you got to know how to handle that situation without, you know, going into an escalation situation where it can get worse. And you can actually use what you've learned in the Peaceful Solution in that situation to teach. Remember, the best way to help a student learn is the way we act, the way we behave in front of them, so they can actually see how they should be behaving in these kind of situations. So let's look on page 90. Now let's learn what exactly is communication. And I want to go ahead and put up this. Now let me just read the first paragraph or the first sentence. It says, to communicate means to convey knowledge, information, thoughts, or feelings in a way that is satisfactorily received or understood. So let's put up a visual. Let's put up that next visual. And I'm going to read the word convey again. This is from the free dictionary online. It says, convey means to carry or take from one place to another, like that conveyor belt you're looking at. Okay, it's carrying something, or it's taking that package from one location to the next worker or the next part of the line that it's on. It's just moving something. And it means to communicate, to impart, to convey a desire, to lead or conduct as a channel or medium, to transmit. Okay, so it just means basically to carry or take from one place to another. And that's what we're doing with this knowledge, information, thoughts, or feelings when we communicate. We're trying to get that across to somebody, okay, in a satisfactory way. The two most common forms of communication are oral and written. However, there are many other ways that people communicate, such as sign language for the deaf and Braille for the blind. You can show the next visual. I can show you what that looks like. You want to look at the screen. Sign language, you know, if you study the sign language, I don't know how I've watched people do the signing with their hands, and I'm like, man, you got to do every letter, you know, of every word that's being spoken. You got to be pretty quick with your hands, you know. But if you look at those sign language symbols, how you should have your fingers when you're making, how your hands should be when you're making the signs, it makes a lot of sense if you study it. Okay, and how they imitate certain letters with their fingers. But that's how some people have to communicate because they can't hear. And then on the right, you have what's called Braille, which is just like they're like little bumps, you know, that you feel with your fingers if you're blind, and you can actually read signs, and you can, you know, and read books. They have books in Braille. They have signs in Braille. I know in different buildings, public buildings, they have signs that are Braille for the blind, so they know if they're going in the right bathroom or the right classroom or whatever else. But imagine having to do that. Well, you'd probably get pretty proficient at it if you were blind. You would probably get real proficient at reading Braille. And if you were deaf, you could probably become an expert in sign language. But just remember, these are some forms of communication that certain people have to use on a daily basis. Now it says, communication is the most important aspect of building relationships with others. The words you use, your tone of voice, facial expressions, and body language all work together to convey what you think and feel. So we're going to learn about all those different, I used to think communication, what do you mean? What do you mean you got to learn about communication? Isn't it kind of simple? I say something, you hear me, right? I mean, that's all there is to it, isn't there? Well, it's not that simple, okay? There's a lot that goes into communication, and sometimes words have nothing to do with communication, because we can communicate, as we're going to find out. Body language says a lot. The way we look says a lot without saying a word. So we can sometimes communicate without using words, as we'll see as we go along here. So it says, did you hear what I just said? For communication to be successful, there must be a speaker and a listener. So put up that next visual so you can see what a speaker and a listener looks like, right? Okay, so there has to be a speaker and a listener. And it says one person, now this is very important, and as a matter of fact, if you go back up to the top of the page where it says to communicate means to convey knowledge, information, thoughts, or feelings in a way that is satisfactorily received or understood, could you underline that? Because that's actually the definition of communication. So I really need you to underline it so you can remember, you remember where that definition started in the book. So it says, for communication to be successful, there has to be a speaker and a listener. One person must give information, that would be the speaker, or, a person that's using a sign language, like we just saw, and the other must be willing and able to receive the information. Okay, now that's important. You need to underline that. One person must give information, and the other must be willing to and able to receive the information. Okay, now let me give you an example of that. Let's go to the next slide. Okay, here's a very primitive form of communication. Now, how many of y'all remember that when you were about 5 or 6? You ever talk to your friend in a tin can? Kind of like who's those guys? Alexander Graham Bell and the other, his friend, was it Watson? Can you hear me, Watson? And one guy's got the can, the other guy's talking through the string there, I guess, and they can hear each other. That's a primitive form of communication, but nonetheless, I'm glad we're not using cans. How about you? Can you imagine having to carry a can everywhere with a long string from here to Los Angeles just to talk to your friend over in Los Angeles? Wouldn't work too well. Or how about carrier pigeons? How about, or Pony Express? Sometimes it took days to find out who your new president was. They had an election on the East Coast, and by the time you found out who the president was, he'd already been inaugurated and been in office for at least 2 months, before you found out about it. But it says, one person must give and one must be willing. Okay, let's look at the next slide. So, here's somebody giving the information. Mom's on the phone, and she says, son, your father and I have told you again and again you're not to leave the house without asking our permission first. You could be lost or hurt, and we wouldn't even know where to begin looking for you. So, the mother's giving the information. But look at the boy. Okay? Does he look very willing to receive that? Well, not according to his body language or his facial expression there. You see his eyes rolling up in his head. And he's thinking to himself, here we go again. Sounds like a skipping CD. Or, as we used to say when I was growing up, she sounds like a broken record. Right? Does that look like somebody who's able or willing to receive the information? No. So, do you think they're comprehending what mom's trying to tell them? Do you think they're satisfactorily receiving the message that's being given to them? No, they're blocking it out. You can tell by the way they look, right, and what they're thinking, right? They're not hearing a word mom said. And guess what? It's going to occur again. He's going to leave the house without permission. Mom's going to call him again, and she's going to say the same thing again, and he's going to think the same thing again until he wakes up and realizes that, hey, wait a minute. I'm supposed to be practicing the peaceful solution and asking my parents to leave the house before I leave. I'm supposed to be getting permission, right? You're not taught that. Now look, you all think that should be a no-brainer. It's not. I remember telling somebody in Rio Bravo, Texas. I had a student in Rio Bravo, Texas that told me that when I told this student that the peaceful solution, when I read it in the Building Moral Excellence unit, which is a unit that's later on in high school, that her parents, she belonged to her parents, and that her parents needed to know before she left the house. She said, that's not what the policeman told me. She said, the constable told me I could leave whenever I want. I was like, okay. So it's not universally understood by everybody that you have to ask permission from your parents before you leave house. Okay, now if you're instructed in the peaceful solution from a very early age, you are taught those things. You're taught you need to ask before you do things. But not everyone's been taught the same way, as I found out. So it says, one must be willing and the other must be able to receive the information. All right, let me give you another example. Let's go to the next visual. So I'm at Sam's Club. Okay, just think of this for a minute. I'm at Sam's Club, and I'm in the toilet paper section. And I'm looking for some Palm toilet paper. All right? That's my brand. That's what I want to use. So there's a worker standing there, and I ask him, I say, Palm? Do you have any Palm here? And they're like, kind of looking, shaking their head like, and I say, Palm. And he's like, I say, Palm. Well, what I didn't know is I'm speaking to somebody that speaks another language. So he doesn't understand what I'm saying. So next visual, he tells me no because he thinks I'm asking for pom-poms. Right? Now you're supposed to laugh. Can we get a laugh light here? So I say pom, like Palm brand, and then he thinks I'm asking about pom-poms, and he's like, no, don't have those here. So I'm giving him information, but he's not able to receive it because he doesn't know the language. Have you ever run into that in a store where, there's a worker there and, they don't speak the same language, and you're trying to convey a need to them. You're trying to convey something to them, but they don't understand. Some of you obviously don't know what pom-poms are, okay? So, okay, then that's okay. That's not a bad thing. Okay, so let me continue. It says, both aspects of communication, the giving and receiving, require self-control. When communicating with others, always consider what you say, how you say it, and to whom you're saying it. I could take a lesson from that because I got some very young people here right now that probably never heard of pom-poms. That's why they never laughed when I said it. I should have considered what I was saying, how I said it, and who I was saying it to, right? Okay, so let's look at the first what we need to think of first is what we say. It says, stop and think about the words you're using. Okay, so look at the next visual. Stop and think about the words you're using. This is what we need to do. We need to stop and think about the words we're going to use. Are they the best words to explain ourselves or to convey our thoughts and feelings? Words are powerful. They can either paint a picture, encourage others, or threaten and hurt. And it says words can be so damaging that they're said to be as hurtful as physical violence. And you remember that next visual, you remember a few weeks ago I showed you a visual of the piece of paper. Next visual, please. You remember I showed you the piece of paper where the smooth piece of paper is somebody's feelings before you say something to them that's hurtful or harmful. And then, after you say it, that crumpled piece of paper is what their feelings look like, after you say it. But then you apologize to them after you've said it and you say you're sorry. Can you make that paper smooth again like you did, like it was? No. So the damage is done. Even with words, the damage is done. You can't fix it completely. Even though you ask for forgiveness, can people forget? Over time, they can forget, right? But it's just not that simple. So we have to really be careful about what we say because, words can be more damaging sometimes than even, somebody can get a black eye and a black eye can go away after a while. But words stick, they stick in a person's mind and their heart. And so it says, okay, words can be damaging. So the other, put up the other visual, that words can hurt or heal, and what did yours do today? That's what we need to be asking ourselves, because remember what I said about interactions. What we say to each other, even if it's just a few words, even if it's just a hello or whatever in passing, people remember these interactions that they have with us. So we got to be careful about the last impression we left on somebody, okay? Because actually, it might be our last impression that we leave with somebody. A lot of people have a lot of regrets right now because of their last interaction with a person, with certain people they've had, because you never know whether you're going to see that person again, after your last interaction with them. You don't know. We don't know what the next moment, the next hour, the next day might bring. So we should always make it our ambition or goal to always treat others in a way that will be positive, so they'll have great memories, not negative memories about the interactions that they have with us. And that's not always going to take place. Sometimes we're going to have conflicts, but if we resolve them in a peaceful way, they can remember that too. Okay, so the second part says how you say it. How you say it and how you look while you're saying it. Stop and think about the tone of voice you're using. Is it peaceful and non-threatening, or is it hostile, threatening, or aggressive? If you compare communication to a song, your tone of voice would be the music that accompanies the words. The tone of voice you choose gives meaning to your words. Now, you can put up that next visual. Remember, music. Words are like music. If the tone is soft, it's soothing, it's relaxing, it's non-threatening. It doesn't create any kind of unsettling emotions to somebody. But what if the music is rock type music, loud, aggressive type language, loud, aggressive type words, or hurtful words? Then it would be like, you could compare it to grunge or rock music or death metal, that would be your communication. It would sound like that to somebody else if you spoke to them using harsh, angry, threatening tones. Okay, so think of your words like music. Either they're peaceful or they're threatening, and they bring some kind of discomfort to somebody. I'm trying to remember the right word. Discomfort is all that comes to my mind at the moment. But if you make somebody feel uncomfortable or uneasy, remember, dis-ease comes from not practicing the peaceful solution. So if somebody doesn't feel at ease with our communication, we're causing dis-ease in their mind. Because remember, dis-ease can be in the mind, not just the body. So we have to be careful not to spread dis-ease to somebody else's mind through the way we communicate with them. Okay? And like I said, we're all still practicing, okay? I'll be the first one to admit I make a lot of mistakes when it comes to communication at times. Like, I'm from Alaska. We just try to get to the point. You know, to me, I don't really make a lot of small talk, or I'm kind of bad with that. I try to do better with it sometimes. I try to work on it, but a lot of times I just want to get to the point and try to be very direct about what I need. Some people aren't like that. Some people, they like when they call you, they want to talk for a little while. They want to, hey, how you doing? And they want to ask a few questions. And sometimes, we might be busy, or we might be from Alaska and we just don't want to talk too much. But I'm trying to work on mine. I'm trying to do better on mine. So now also, it's not just what you say, it's how you say it and how you look while you're saying it. But it's also, let me finish that last paragraph there. It says, the tone of voice you choose gives meaning to your words. Have you ever called a friend and by the way he said, hello? You knew he was not in a great mood. Your tone of voice, facial expressions, and body language help to convey your true feelings when you speak. So if somebody answers the phone and they're like, hello, you already know automatically they're not having a great moment. They're not. It might not be that they're having a bad day. It just might have caught them at a bad time, right? So, and if you ask them, well, how you doing? They're like, I'm all right. You're like, well, you're saying you're all right, but you don't sound all right, right? So what are you going to believe more? Their tone of voice or the words they're using? So you see, their tone of voice is communicating much more than their words, because the words don't say they're doing very well. Their tone of voice tells you they're not having a great moment right then. Okay, so remember on page 91, it's also to whom you're saying it. We have to consider that as well when we're communicating and we're using self-control. We've got to consider whom we're saying it to. It's no secret that you speak to your friends differently than you do to your parents or other authority figures. Or at least you should. You don't tell your teacher, hey, what's up, dude? Or you don't tell the police officer, hey, dog. Or you don't tell your, you know what I'm saying? You don't say it that way. I wouldn't even call my friends dogs anyway, but I know some people, they communicate like that. But, you have to consider who you're talking to when you communicate with them, because when you do that, it shows that you're practicing self-control, that you took the time to realize, that's an authority figure, and that you recognize, hey, I need to show a much higher level of respect than I normally would. It says, for instance, while you might say, hey, what's up to your friends, you would more likely say, hello, Miss Sir, or hello, Mrs. Smith, to an adult. Using more formal language when addressing an adult or authority figure demonstrates self-control. It shows that you took the time to stop and think about the person you're speaking with, and then adjust your language to show respect. Okay? Adjust your language. All right, so let's look at the bottom here. It says, it's not always what we say, but the way we say it that shows respect to another person. And that's a quote from The Peaceful Solution. And let's go ahead and turn back now to page LP4D, and we'll look at number 5. It says, have students complete the Test Your Knowledge on Communication exercise found on page 92 of their handbooks. Review the correct answers. Emphasize, and that means really drill it into their mind, that only 7% of ideas are communicated by the words we speak. The remaining 93% is conveyed by our tone of voice and body language. And you know, that's my problem I have with social media and communicating over any kind of, whether it's WhatsApp or whether it's telephone or Facebook or whatever. The words are only 7% in normal communication. And you're left with no ability to see their facial expression, their tone of voice, their body language. So it's really not the best form of communication, okay? And there can be a lot of misunderstandings when words are written. And you have to remember a keyboard. I remember someone saying once in the Peaceful Solution program, they said a keyboard is just an extension of your tongue. You know, a keyboard, when you're writing, it's just like using your tongue. You're just not saying it. You're saying it with letters and characters. And it can be miscommunicated. It can be mistaken by the other party. And I would say there's a lot of that takes place. And, you know, even in our, in the Peaceful Solution and later books, like in the Workplace Manual, it talks about, you know, writing text in a business and making sure that you read it again a couple times before you send it. Okay, you know, and just make sure that it's conveyed properly. And then nowadays we got these phones, you know, where they're called smartphones. I don't know, mine's not very smart because it misspells a lot of stuff and it doesn't even say what I said. So you better be careful when you use that I don't know what they call that, speakerphone, or, you know, you speak into it and it dictates your words. You better read it first, because there's been a lot of things that I didn't say that went over text, and I was really regretting it because I didn't read it first, okay? I remember one particular thing that I remember was somebody was telling me something very sad that occurred in their life, and I said something like sure. I used the word sure, and it came out sewer. And they're like, they texted me back, and they're like, sewer? You know, with a big question mark, you know, like, why are you saying that? You know, like, and I'm like, oh man, it's a stupid phone, you know. Well, I don't know what's more stupid, the one that's the phone or the one that didn't look at the text before he sent it, right? So be careful about what you send. Make sure that it's your words that you actually used. Okay, so all right, so it says we're looking at the Test Our Knowledge. Emphasize that only 7% of ideas are communicated by words we speak, and the remaining 93% is tone of voice, body language, and etc. So let's go ahead and go to page 92, and let's do the quiz. And this is a very simple quiz to do. It's only 3 questions. So it says, circle the answer that you think is correct. How much of your communication is based on the words you say? Well, we just heard it's 7%. But you know, most students will tell you, you know what their answer will be if they don't know already? It's generally going to be 75%. Because really most people think like I did. I thought words were like, you know, everything when it came to communication. And they're actually shocked to find out that it's only 7%. It's something that really, it's a real eye-opener to people. Number 2 says, how much of your communication is based on your facial expressions? Is it 5%, 40%, or 55%? And the answer is C, 55%. And how much of your communication is based on your tone of voice? A, 20%, B, 38%, or C, 10%? And the answer is 38%. So when it comes to communication, there's often a great deal of emphasis put on words. But you might be surprised to know that others interpret most of what we're saying from our facial expressions and tone of voice than from our words. So, it's kind of like I was told years ago that, like, when you're talking to a child, right? You're talking to a child. You have to be very careful about this because, especially a real young child, because if they see that you're upset, like if you look angry when you're giving them an instruction, right? They're not really going to hear what you're saying. They're not really going to hear the instructions so much as they're going to be looking at how you look, They're going to be looking like, my teacher's really upset, right? But they're really not going to be hearing what you're saying because they're paying so much attention to how you look and your body language. And, sometimes parents can actually look like they're going to strike their child, or, when they get angry, they got their hands up, on their hips or whatever, and they're standing there looking all intimidating. And the child, they're not hearing a word you're saying. All they're thinking is, are they going to hit me? They look really upset, So we've got to be aware. What I'm saying is we have to be aware of what we're saying and how we say it when we're communicating with the young ones. And I think I was told you really need to get down on their level, get down, and kind of look them in the eye and try to, remain calm and not, use harsh tone, etc. with them. And that's something else I try to practice with the young people, because I do realize that I was the same way. When I was young, I can remember when my teachers or parents talked to me, how they would give that look. And I was just looking about how they looked, if they were giving me that look or not. And I wasn't thinking too much about what they said. I was just concerned about, how they might react, whether I was going to get the belt. Boy, they sure look like they're upset. They're really angry right now. So I really didn't hear a lot of the instruction because I was looking at those things. Okay, so the correct answers are number 1 is C, number 2 is C, and number 3 is B. Okay, so let's look, let's see what we need to do now. Let's turn back to LP4D, and let's look at number 6, step 6. It says, explain to students that learning to actively listen not only requires stopping to consider the speaker's words, but also his facial expressions and body language. Listening for the facts and the feelings behind the facts will lessen the ability or the opportunity for misunderstandings. Have students read the section entitled Listening Also Requires Self-Control, found on page 93. Have students pay close attention to the section called Tips for Active Listening, found on page 95, and instruct them to complete the exercises on pages 96 and 97. Discuss answers with the class. So let's go ahead and turn over to page 93, where it says, listening also requires self-control. Did you ever think there was this much to communication? And did you ever consider that, these things aren't taught in a public school? They don't know this. And a matter of fact, most adults don't know this because they were never taught in a public school. But unless you've been through some kind of a college course in psychology or sociology or counseling, you get a degree in counseling or some kind of therapy, you're not going to learn this kind of stuff. It's not out. The information's not out there. But the Peaceful Solution puts it in a format where you can teach it in a junior high school. And this information is extremely valuable, especially the part about listening and how listening is listening is the biggest part of communication, because you have 2 ears, but you only have 1 tongue. Right? We should use our ears a lot more than we use our tongue in a lot of cases. So, but people pay big money for people to listen to them, don't they? You ever go to a psychiatrist or some kind of counseling therapy and pay somebody, $100 an hour to sit there and talk to them? Listening, people love people to listen to. People love people to listen to them. Everyone wants to be heard, okay? So it says, listening also requires self-control. Did you know that another important to communication is listening? Think about it. You can talk all day, but if the person you're talking to cannot hear or understand a word you said, then you've not communicated. That's right. Like Chris said in the last class, if you're sitting there speaking English to somebody that speaks Spanish, you're just like a loud horn or something. They don't understand anything you're saying, and vice versa. Okay? They probably want to understand, but they can't because they don't know the language. Self-control when listening means to make sure through active listening that you're not only hearing what's being said, but that you also understand the intent behind the words. You know why? You understand that most people that tell you things or they want something, they beat around the bush. They don't normally come right out and tell you what they're thinking, what they're feeling, what they want, what their needs are. A lot of times they try to beat around the bush and they expect you to figure out what they want. Okay? Because a lot of people, quite frankly, they might be prideful and they might be afraid to ask for a certain thing. Or they might feel like they're stupid because they ask a question. So they kind of go around it. They kind of indirectly say things trying to get information from you. And you're sitting there, if you're an active listener, if you learn these tools and tips that we're going to learn in this chapter, you'll actually be able to figure out what it is they're actually trying to convey to you through the active listening skills we're going to learn here. It says, in other words, you're trying to comprehend what the person's saying and feeling. Learning to be an active listener will help you solve problems and disagreements because it opens the door to communicating in a way that's respectful and caring. So we're going to learn about this active listening. It says the question of the day is, why is it important to understand what someone is saying and feeling? It says, believe it or not, words alone do not convey the full meaning of spoken communication. As mentioned in the previous section, your tone of voice, facial expressions, and body language all give meaning to your words. A great listener not only hears the speaker's words, but also pays attention to the nonverbal aspects in order to fully understand the speaker's message. So I need you to underline or highlight that part right there, that a great listener not only hears the speaker's words, but also pays attention to the nonverbal aspects, the facial expressions, the body language, the tone of voice, etc. Active listening enables you to communicate more effectively. It also shows the speaker that you're really listening and that you care about what they have to say. And people, they want to know we care. They want to know they matter. They want to know that, they're important, and rightfully so. And, a lot of times, like I said, sometimes I might not feel like giving somebody that attention at the moment because my attention's on something else. And I'm going to tell you right now, I am famous for looking at my computer when somebody's talking to me. And I'll sit there and I'll be doing my work, and they'll be saying something to me, and I'll be sitting there, I'll be doing my work. Yeah. Oh yeah. But my mind is more on my work than it is on their words, and it shows because later on when I'm talking to them, they'll say, you know what I told you about, such and such thing, and I'll be like, no, I don't remember that. And they'll be like, what do you mean you don't remember? We just talked about it yesterday. And I'm like, when? Right? And then there's this conflict, because I'm sitting there saying I didn't hear it, and they're swearing up and down they said it. And I'm like, when did you say that? Right? Well, I said it yesterday. Well, the truth of the matter is, they did say it, but I'm on the computer, and my mind's somewhere else, and I really didn't hear everything they were saying. Okay? How many of you do that? You don't have to raise your hand, I guess, but just think about it, right? And I'm not saying you're on your computer. You could be doing anything. You might be mowing the lawn. You might be doing whatever. And of course, when you're mowing the lawn, it's going to be hard to hear anything but the lawnmower, but that's a bad example. But your mind is on something else, and somebody told you something, and you don't remember any, because your mind was on something else. we really need to train ourselves, or really try to give somebody our attention when they're talking to us. In other words, turn to them and look at them and gain all of what they're trying to convey, because you're not actively listening at all if you're not looking at them, because you have to be looking at them to be able to see their body language, right? Their facial expression. Now, over the phone, if you listen to their tone of voice, you can also gain knowledge with their words. But what I'm saying is, you really have to give them your attention to be actively listening. And it's something I'm working on myself. I really need to make more effort. It would create a lot less conflicts, okay, in my life, okay, if I did that. I tell you, I get myself in a lot of trouble over that. I'll just leave it at that. Okay, so all right, where was I? Okay, let's see. Okay, so it takes focus, effort, and self-control, and stop to consider someone's words, feelings, and tone of voice, and then decide on the most appropriate response. It says, for example, your friend who has been having a difficult time in English class says, "I hate English." When you read her facial expression and listen to her tone of voice, you realize she doesn't really hate the class. It becomes apparent that she's frustrated because although she's studying, she's still getting low grades. So, frustrated. Y'all remember what frustrated is? Turn back to page 31 in your book. Frustrated. Frustration means dissatisfaction that comes from unresolved problems or unfulfilled needs. Yeah, she has a problem. Her problem is she doesn't understand the math or the English or whatever the subject was. She's not understanding it. She's not understanding the English, okay, what she's learning in English. So she's frustrated about it. She doesn't feel like there's any, like she's ever going to get it. It says, when you read her facial expression and listen to her tone of voice, you realize she doesn't hate the class. It becomes apparent she's frustrated because although she's studying, she's still getting low grades. The right response would send a message to your friend that you were listening to her and understood what she meant. This is where learning to use self-control to become an active listener can really be helpful. Another aspect of active listening is empathy. Empathy means to be able to put yourself in someone else's shoes and feel what they might be experiencing. In other words, stop and consider how you would feel if you were trying hard on a subject and still were not doing well. You might feel frustrated or disappointed. You might even be tempted to give up. So when you respond to your friend's statement that she hates English class, you want to keep all these things in mind. And here's 2 examples of responses that show that you're listening. You could say, "Boy, it sounds like you're really frustrated." Or you could say, "I can tell that you're having a hard time in English class." Okay? Both of those responses would not only be appropriate, but they would show care and concern for what your friend is experiencing. And I've tried that. I practice that. I do try to practice that when people tell me certain things, and I will say, "Wow, it really sounds like I bet you that was really frustrating," or "I bet you that was really disappointing," when that took place. And I found that it's a door opener. They actually will talk to you more because they feel like you care, like you heard what they said, and then they offer more information, and eventually you can work the problem out with them. It says, active listening is a powerful means of communication. It gives you an opportunity to use self-control as you listen and then choose the right response. It's also a skill that takes practice, and more practice, because the normal tendency is to talk more than listen. Everybody wants to share their ideas, opinions, and be heard. The desire to be heard can make it hard to be patient and listen before responding, but it can be done, and you can do it. Because remember, if you're like me, I still practice at that too, is that I'm thinking about what I'm going to say more than I'm hearing what they're telling me. I'm thinking about what I'm going to say in return more than what I hear somebody saying to me, okay? And that takes practice to get over that, because we do usually want to speak more than listen. So it takes practice to change our thought patterns about that. So take time to listen to others no matter how much you want to speak. This shows self-control. Remember, that's what we're learning. We're learning about self-control in interactions and communication. Let's see. That's all the time we have tonight. What's our next class? 5/15, 2022 at 5:30 p.m. Central Standard Time. You've been a great class tonight. It's been a great opportunity and privilege, and we'll hope you'll join us again next time. Thank you very much.